in a salute to the flag of the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, may I call Mr. Paul F. Shedd and Chaplain Lyle F. Burt. Would you please come front and center?
Jack, the national anthem.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You should do that right now.
Okay. And now the band will present the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul F. Shedd.
Bob Edson, Merritt Edson Jr., Merton Edson, Merritt Edson III, and the families of General Edson. Honored guests, Marines, former Marines, State Police, fellow veterans, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. I am proud to be a small part of this special day here in Rutland. We are met here today to dedicate this memorial in honor of a true Rutland hero, General Merritt A. Edson. Words fail to express our thoughts, but deeds tell our true feelings. Therefore, by virtue of achievements here represented, we dedicate this memorial to the exalted memory of General Merritt A. Edson. And may our lives be worthy of the heroic deeds here commemorated. Thank you. Our chaplain, Lyle Burt.
Please uncover. Heavenly Father, we ask thy blessing for the family of General Edson, the honored guests, and all people assembled here today. We ask thee to bless this memorial and to help make us more understanding of this great hero from Rutland, Vermont, General Merritt A. Edson. We ask this in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Now to bring us a welcome, Joseph P. Sheridan, 1st Marine Division Association from Boston, Massachusetts. Mr. Sheridan.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Marines, we are here to not only honor the memory of General Merritt Edson, but especially to commemorate the events of 50 years ago today, which led to Colonel Edson at that time being awarded this country's highest military award, the Medal of Honor, for his actions above and beyond the call of duty on a little island called Guadalcanal. The Boston chapter and the Marine Corps 1st Marine Division Association has undertaken these plaques as sort of a learning memento, not so much to us, those that have gone before us, but for the children that are now around and going into the future, that they can read and understand by reading memorials such as this and the ones that are lined up and down this parkway here, to tell them how very important it is to realize what the freedoms that they enjoy today, that the cost was very dear, and that people fought and bled so that they may enjoy these freedoms. So I would suggest that the adults bring the children down to this park, let them read this memorial and the other memorials here, and let them learn a little bit about the history of the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sheridan. We certainly enjoyed your remarks. And now for the unveiling of Article 1 here in the city of Rutland, something that will remain here for years and years and years to come. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to call on the following. Leonard Doucette, would you please come forward? Donald Shedd, Paul Shedd, and Robert Shedd. Now, if it sounds like I might have made a mistake saying the name Shedd so many times, I didn't make a mistake, believe me. These are 3 brothers from our area that served with the general, and they are very instrumental in bringing this all together here today. Gentlemen, would you please unveil?
We've got one more.
Oh, we got one more.
Got a shed.
And I might add, we're very pleased to have you, young man. Gentlemen, will you unveil the statue? Thank you very much, gentlemen and the band. In order to get anything placed here in the park, it takes some effort on the part of the mayor. And today we feel very proud to have the mayor of the city of Rutland here today to accept this fine monument. Mayor Weinberg.
Thank you, Jack. Just so that no one is misled, I'm not responsible for digging the hole here or anything like that. But it is my great privilege and pleasure to accept on behalf of the people of the city of Rutland this absolutely wonderful memorial to the memory of a great man. General Edson was a member of my grandfather's generation. A generation which entered the 20th century having never seen a global war, having absolutely no way to imagine a nuclear weapon. A generation which fought the First World War, and which, with the assistance and the hard work and the dedication and the blood and sweat of its next generation, fought the Second World War. And at the end of that Second World War, those who had seen both, and especially seen what had happened to the peace in between, recognized that what we did as a conclusion of war determined whether there would be peace thereafter. And it was the people of this nation and leaders like General Edson and thousands of others who decided to change the pattern of history, and instead of punishing the vanquished, to lift them up. And in so doing, we have had nearly 50 years of peace. But a war ensued nonetheless, a Cold War that had its hot battles, battles in places like Korea, Vietnam, Nicaragua, Afghanistan. But we won that war too. My generation is what I like to call the duck and cover generation. We were the kids who in elementary school had to be prepared psychologically for 15 minutes warning to Armageddon. And we were prepared to the degree that any human being can be. So well so that it never occurred to me until a very short time ago that it would be possible in my lifetime or my children's lifetime to see a world without the threat of nuclear war, without the threat of global war. And yet we stand here today on the threshold of a new century where that very real possibility exists for the first time since this century dawned. I accept, on behalf of myself, of my children, and of all the people of the city of Rutland, this wonderful memorial, not simply in memory of one of the greatest of our native sons, but also as a lesson to my children and the children of Rutland and of Vermont thereafter, that it was Americans like General Edson who kept the light of freedom and of liberty alive, so that more people today could breathe the free air of democracy around the world than ever before in human history, and so that our children could awaken in a day without the threat of nuclear global holocaust. It was each of you, General Edson, those who fought with him, those who served and supported and fought before, those who served, supported, and fought afterwards, and those, yes, who will serve, support, and fight in the future, who have made this possible. And on behalf of all of us, I wish to thank all of you for that. There is no greater gift than the gift of liberty. There is no more precious prize than the prize of peace. And to all, I thank you, and I very humbly and gratefully accept this magnificent memorial. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Your remarks were well taken. At this time in the program, may I take this opportunity to introduce a young man with the same name as the guest here today, Merritt E. Edson, Jr. Would you please stand and take a bow? Thus far, we have talked a great deal about the Marine Corps, and rightly so. But this celebration here today has a co-sponsor, a co-reason for us being here, and that is the State Police of the state of Vermont. General Edson accepted the responsibility of stepping into the state of Vermont, his home state, the one he loved, to put together a state force that was going to do us well for many years to come. At the time, there were all kinds of problems that existed. You know, the old way of doing things is always hard to get rid of when you want to instill something that will do the job better. The governor at the time decided that he needed an outstanding individual, one who could do his work and do it in a manner that would be above reproach. And so he called on Mr. Edson. He stepped forward. He left his uniform and actually designed the uniform that our state troopers have today. He started it from a series of nothings. He had to hire everybody. He had to do everything. And he did it. Today, we can look back and say, thank God, you gentlemen are taking care of us people now. But the world, I'm sure it was a very proud moment when he was able to step back and view what he saw, the work of his hands. And so today, we have Lieutenant Colonel Robert Horton of the Vermont State Police with us to make some remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Horton.
Thank you. I think my speech has just been made for me by Mr. Daly, but I do appreciate and I would reiterate everything that he has said as it relates to the Vermont State Police and General Edson. I think that you will notice, as Mr. Daly said, when General Edson designed the uniform, I think he had something basically in mind when he came up with the colors and the material, because they are very similar to the Marine Corps uniform. While they've changed somewhat, a little bit of yellow piping has been added, but it's the basic Marine Corps color. I'd like to really comment maybe on perhaps 4 years of Mr. Edson's time with the state of Vermont. Now, a lot of others here will talk about his military career, but I think a lot of things go unnoticed in the state of Vermont and what he has done for the state as it relates to the state police. The General's extraordinary military service to his nation ended in 1947 when he returned home. His experience was put to good use by then-Governor Ernest W. Gibson, who appointed Edson as Vermont's first Commissioner of Public Safety in 1947. Less is known of his, at this point of his career here in Vermont. The General's military experience prepared him for the many rigors of running a paramilitary law enforcement agency. But a look back at the limited record still available from his 4 years as commissioner shows that the late 40s and early 50s were not easy times. General Edson's first task was to convert a highway patrol operation formerly run by the Motor Vehicle Department into Vermont's first statewide law enforcement agency. At the time, the department's State Police Division became primarily responsible for general motor vehicle enforcement, criminal investigation of fires, explosions, and other hazards, as well as the inspection of public buildings. Interesting, General Edson's salary at that time was set at a minimum of $5,000. His reputation as a tough-minded, no-holds-barred Marine followed him to the department where he pulled no punches. He wrote to Governor Gibson that because of the far-reaching duties imposed on the department, some occasional criticisms had resulted. General Edson concluded that some of the criticism came because many were too optimistic about the process of building a statewide law enforcement agency from the ground up. Edson's first troopers were well versed in motor vehicle law, but the transition to a criminal enforcement agency was difficult, especially in light of the fact that the demands placed for service from the public continued to increase, even as the department sought to train 60 employees on the job. 27 uniformed troopers transferred to the department from Motor Vehicles Highway Patrol Division and 28 new troopers were trained during a 6-week course taught by the FBI. During the first 2 years, the department showed remarkable progress in building a statewide radio communications network, which still is in use today, a criminal investigation and identification bureau, a state fire marshal's office, and a division charged with education and public information. Edson was a taskmaster. In the first year alone, the 55 troopers worked an average of 90 hours a week, for a total of 206,000 hours that year. The department patrolled 1.7 million miles of roadway with its 40 cars. During the first year, Edison's troopers obtained over 2,000 criminal and motor vehicle convictions and were rewarded with nearly 200 criminals being sentenced or placed on probation. As with everything else General Edison tackled in life, his tenure at public safety was marked by great success. By the end of his third year in office, General Edson had built a radio communication system equipping 55 state police cars and 13 sheriff's vehicles. Total hours on duty increased to 224,000 hours and 3,600 arrests. A remarkable feat considering available resources at that time. In summary, General Edson presided over the Public Safety Department during an important era in law enforcement history. The resulting improvements in professionalism, statewide police services, training, safety education, patrol techniques, and administration laid a basis for today's Public Safety Department. General Edson provided Vermont state troopers and public safety employees with an excellent example of professionalism. Edson left state service in 1951 after 4 years of commissioner with the department to go with the NRA in Washington. The general took the lessons learned from years of combat service, administrative duty in the Marines, and professional management, and transferred them to civilian life, serving the people of Vermont in the same distinguished way he served the citizens of the United States in 3 wars. For his service, we owe him a debt of thanks and an honored place in Vermont history. Thank you.
Now that we have put together the proper mix here this afternoon, I think perhaps it would be wonderful if we could hear a few remarks from Herbert Bob Edson. Bob, please step forward. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's a very popular man in Vermont today.
Thank you very much. General Platt and Colonel Weber, Colonel Horton, Mayor Winberg, Mr. Daly, Mr. Shedd, Mr. Leonard, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and a privilege to be here today sharing with you this important event and speaking on behalf of my brother Austin, as well as General Edson's other relatives, both those present and those who are unable to attend. It has been over 37 years since our father's tragic, untimely death. During that time, his name has been given to the children of Marines, at least one marksmanship trophy, roads, streets, the Marine Corps Communication Officers School at Quantico, Virginia, a Navy destroyer, which is now part of the Intrepid Museum in New York City, the Marine Corps Rifle Range at Camp Pendleton, California, and most recently, the local Marine Corps League Detachment, amongst others. His extensive collection of papers and photographs are housed at the Library of Congress. His uniforms are held by the Smithsonian Institution, and his small arms collection, plus other military items, are held by the Marine Corps Museums in Washington, D.C. and Quantico, Virginia. A biography is currently being written by a historian and former Marine Corps officer. And today, a monument is being dedicated to his memory in the city where he was born some 95 years ago on April 25th, 1897. These are all important to the preservation of his memory. Of equal or greater importance are the memories that we pass on to those who follow. My personal memories are of a father who made a significant difference in my life, as did my mother and my maternal grandmother. These memories, and perhaps your own, are also of a soft-spoken soldier of the sea who, as one writer said, was as rugged as the Vermont granite, as tough and straight as the trees of the Green Mountains, as forthright and demanding as Vermont's cold and icy winters, and as kind and generous as her sunny, pleasant summers. They are also of a man who knew both joy and sorrow, and who elicited a strong sense of admiration and loyalty. It has been said that General Edson was one of the Marine Corps' most illustrious officers and leaders of all time. He was an outstanding example of those who, unsung, keep the nation's ramparts strong in peace, and who are summoned in time of war to rally our forces and defend our liberty at all costs. As a United States Marine Corps officer, gentleman, and patriot, he considered a privilege and an honor to so serve. He was a man of vision and resourcefulness. He was a man of extreme loyalty to his high ideals and to his country. He was an example of leadership and accomplishment. He was also an example of courage, forthrightness, loyalty, and fighting spirit to every young Marine with whom he came in contact. The plaque affixed to Edson Hall at Quantico, Virginia, further describes him as aviator and infantryman, meticulous in training, perfectionist in plans, audacious in combat. His leadership of the Marine with a rifle added luster to the battle honors of the Corps in Nicaragua, Tulagi, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian. As Commissioner of Public Safety of Vermont and Executive Director of the National Rifle Association, he kept burnished his high ideals of service. Such was the father, friend, mentor, leader, and servant of the people who was ordered to permanent duty beyond the seas on August 14, 1955. Thank you, and Godspeed.
Thank you very much, Bob. And now may I call on Joseph P. Sheridan. Bob. Joseph, here you are.
Thank you. This comes under remarks in the program. I'd like to digress from that a little bit. And in this day and age where you hear senators from Texas saying they knew John Kennedy, and you hear ex-presidents like Ronald Reagan saying they knew what was his name now? Oh yeah, Thomas Jefferson. I must admit that I did not know Colonel Edson, and I'll tell you why. The Battle of Bloody Ridge was fought on a tropical island on a surface very hilly like the hills of Vermont, but it was only about 10 football fields long, maybe 300 yards wide, covered with high cooney grass like razor blades. And in a situation such as this, you did not get up and yell, "Hey, where's Colonel Edson?" We all had favorite names. His should have been Carrot Top, but they call him Red Mike. Now, as a communicator in these days, a little PFC, about 18 years old, no wires, no telephones, no radio, I became a runner. And I ran around with little slips of paper and carrying messages to the hierarchy, delivering it to the privates in the field. I used to carry messages and orders, and I had what you might call a passing acquaintance with a Marine called Red Mike. I passed him messages he passed me orders to forward. He was never hard to find. He was always either at the front line, in front of the front line, or a little bit behind it, filling in breaks in the line with sort of reluctant warriors or volunteers, such as the cooks, mechanics, and even communicators, filling in holes that have been decimated. The men who served with him, under him, would have followed him anywhere, and he led them wherever his elite troops were needed. What I would like today, we saw the Shed brothers here. I would like everybody that was on the ridge with Red Mike to put their hand up today so we can see and appreciate all of you, if you would. Thank you very much. Semper Fi.
Today it is with a great deal of pleasure that I welcome Colonel Art Weber, representing General Monday, Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, for remarks. Colonel?
General Platt, the Edson family, guests, Marines, Vermonters, it's a very special privilege for me to be at this field of honor today. And although we're focusing on the citation of Medal of Honor, which I will read later, I wanted to say a few things about this unusual and heroic gentleman. As a son of Vermont, he went off when he was going to college in his first reserve summer to Eagle Pass, Texas, with the 1st Vermont Regiment, infantry. Came back and never did get a chance to finish school because he took a competitive exam to become a lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps and serve in World War I. And his intelligence was extremely high, and taking a test that only perhaps 20 out of 1,000 would pass. The general saw service at the end of World War I, an occupation in Germany. And as an infantry officer, I was curious when I put together this little piece to find out that he'd had time to go to Pensacola in the early 20s and become a naval aviator. And he served in those billets for a certain period of time. All Marines go to sea on ships, and he was one of those. And he took a detachment from the USS Rochester into Nicaragua. And he took the 60 Marines on that ship and took them inland for a 6-month patrol, chasing the forerunners of the Sandinistas. For this action, he received his first Navy Cross. In the 30s, he served in a variety of assignments, and probably best known for being a distinguished rifle marksman and captain of the Marine Corps rifle and pistol teams. Later, he came to Quantico, and he took the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, which is a standard infantry battalion, and made them into the Raiders. They were supposed to be the 1st Raider Battalion, but of course they took the name of the commander, Edson's Raiders. And they went off, and they made initial landings against the Japanese in a little place called Tulagi, which is not far from Guadalcanal. And in 3 days of savage fighting, threw the Japanese out, and was allowed then to take part in the actions in Guadalcanal. And we sit here on this fine day and enjoy the sunshine and the freedom we have. And those that served in those days that can remember back then, the battles in Guadalcanal would determine what happened in the Pacific, with the Japanese about to overrun New Guinea and perhaps take Australia. So the battle for Guadalcanal was important. And most important of all was that little strip of hills to the west of the airfield called the Ridge. Bloody Ridge, Raiders Ridge. Let's call it Edson's Ridge, because that's what it was. And September 13th and 14th, in the nighttime hours, his 800 men, slowly whittled down over 2 nights of savage combat, defeated the most serious threat that the Japanese had mounted to take the island. And Guadalcanal stayed, and that was a start back with the United States to take back what had been taken from us. For that action, he received the Medal of Honor, which I will read in a little bit. He later was promoted to colonel and commanded the 5th Marines, also participating in follow-on battles in Guadalcanal. Went out as the Chief of Staff and participated in the tower landings in 1943, and participated in Tinian and Saipan later on. And he came back and served at headquarters of the Marine Corps. I'm going to leave a certain portion of what he did there to my next speaker, who was familiar with those times. But while he got out, he came here and organized the Vermont State Police, which you see here, a fine-looking group, and also was the president and executive director of the NRA. So we've got an extremely unusual man who did a lot of things, and he did them very, very well. Mr. Daly asked me to read the citation that stands before you, and I hope all of you will have a chance to come read it a little bit later. General Merritt A. Edson, citation, for extraordinary heroism and conspicuous intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty as commanding officer of the 1st Raider Battalion with the 1st Parachute Battalion attached during action against enemy Japanese forces in the Solomon Islands on the night of September 13, 14, 1942. After the airfield on Guadalcanal had been seized from the enemy on August 8, Colonel Edson, with a force of 800 men, was assigned to the occupation and defense of a ridge dominating the jungle on either side of the airport. Facing a formidable Japanese attack, which, augmented by infiltration, had crashed through our front lines, he, by skillful handling of his troops, successfully withdrew his forward units to a reserve line with minimum casualties. When the enemy, in a subsequent series of violent assaults, engaged our force in desperate hand-to-hand combat with bayonets, rifles, pistols, grenades, and knives, Colonel Edson, although continuously exposed to hostile fire throughout the night, personally directed defense of the reserve position against a fanatical foe of greatly superior numbers. By his astute leadership and gallant devotion to duty, he enabled his men, despite severe losses, to cling tenaciously to their command on the vital ridge, thereby retaining command not only of the Guadalcanal airfield, but also of the 1st Division's entire offensive installations in the surrounding area. Signed, Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States. To complete our portion of the story that talks about General Edson, I asked Major General Platt, United States Marine Corps retired, a well-decorated and famous Marine in his own right, to come share that particular portion, which perhaps is as critical as to what happened to the Marine Corps that night on Guadalcanal as it is today. Sir.
Thank you, Art. I firmly believe that if it wasn't for General Edson, there wouldn't be a Marine Corps today. Let me explain that. Right after World War II, a piece of legislation was drafted by the administration to reorganize the armed forces. And that piece of legislation posed a threat to the Marine Corps, because nowhere in it were the roles and missions, the job, if you will, of the Marine Corps spelled out. That piece of legislation, by not doing that, provided a means whereby the Marine Corps could be drastically reduced or eliminated. And there were lots of heavy hitters around Washington in those days who wanted to see the Marine Corps reduced or eliminated. One of the heavy hitters had a name quite familiar to you. His name was General Eisenhower. At that time, he was Chief of Staff of the Army. In General Eisenhower's view, the Marine Corps should have been drastically reduced, never allowed to expand in time of war, and spend their time manning the landing craft that would take soldiers from amphibious ships to the beach. And I can prove that because it's in writing. There were others who went further and wanted the Marine Corps eliminated. Now, to give you a flavor of how they felt, and so I'll be accurate, I want to read you an extract, very brief, of a speech that was given by a general, Army Air Force, to an audience which was made up of many businessmen and 50 senior naval officers. This is what he had to say, and I quote, "You gentlemen better understand that the Army Air Force is tired of being a subordinate outfit. It was the predominant force during the war, and it's going to be the predominant force during the peace, whether you like it or not, and we don't care whether you like it or not. The Army Air Force is going to run the show. You, the Navy, are not going to have anything but a couple of carriers, which are ineffective anyway and will probably be sunk during the first battle. Now, as for the Marines, you know what the Marines are. A small, bitched-up army talking Navy lingo. We're going to put those Marines in the regular Army and make efficient soldiers out of them," end quote. It's rather obvious that the inter-service cooperation and teamwork that we all witnessed during Desert Shield sure didn't exist on the shores of the Potomac in the years right after World War II. Now, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, perceiving this threat to the Corps, organized a board of 12 officers. He gave the leadership of that board to Brigadier General Merritt Edson. The administrator, and that's all he was a young major by the name of Platt. I had the privilege of serving directly under General Edson, of watching him operate on a daily basis. And it was a lesson in leadership, guts, blunt honesty, and extraordinary patriotism that I've never forgotten. Now, General Edson's board did tremendous work, but the threat was not eliminated. And I'll tell you why. Because a gag was put on Navy and Marine officers in terms of testifying in front of Congress. And by a gag, I mean that they had to submit their testimony to the White House before they could give it. It went so far that President Truman sent for the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and he said, "You get those damn Marine officers off the Hill." Well, perceiving that kind of a playing field, General Edson decided that the only way the Marines' message could be gotten across to Congress was if he voluntarily retired and testified as a civilian. And he did. And that was a great sacrifice, because almost to a man, Marines of that generation expected General Edson to ultimately wear the 4 stars of the Commandant of the Marine Corps. I was in the hearing room when he testified. As you might expect, it was blunt, it was outspoken. In fact, one congressman described it as though somebody dropped an atomic bomb in the committee room. And the legislation was in fact changed. And for the first time in the history of the Corps, the roles and missions, the job of the Marine Corps was spelled out in the law. And there it stands to this day, 45 years later. And I firmly believe that if that law hadn't been changed as a result of General Edson's testimony, the Marine Corps as we know it today, 3 divisions and 3 wings, would not exist. General Edson said in his own testimony, if this bill passes in the form that it's been submitted to Congress, any president, if he is so advised or so desires, can eliminate the Marine Corps by the stroke of a pen. And I firmly believe that because of General Edson's testimony and sacrifice, that this nation has been well served by a Marine Corps, that it provides this maritime nation of ours, which exists on a globe which is 70% water, with balanced forces that enable this nation to protect its vital interests worldwide. So I wholeheartedly commend the Edson detachment of the Marine Corps League and the Boston organization of the 1st Marine Division Association, which I'm a member, for making this monument possible, because it's a well-deserved tribute. A well-deserved tribute to a great Vermonter, a legendary Marine, and a devoted patriot. A tribute to a man who had the guts to speak his mind, no matter what the personal cost. A tribute to a man who personified the motto of the Corps he loved, always faithful, semper fidelis.
Major General Joe Platt has told you, ladies and gentlemen, as it was. Thank you, sir, for those fine remarks. You certainly have. You know, I have known him through a secondary person, and he told me what kind of a guy Joe Platt was. And I listened and I listened. And today was the first day that I was ever able to shake hands with him. And you know, Joe, Sam Fernandez told it as it was. You are the guy, you are a Marine general. Jake Jacobson, Veterans Assistance Office, Rutland, Vermont. Would you please come front and center? Jake. Ladies and gentlemen, Jake Jacobson, a real doer in our community.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I didn't know General Edson personally. I knew his spirit. When I look at my commander from Vietnam that didn't come back, he represented that same spirit. But the one thing that impressed me about the spirit of Edson, he brought it home and he used his skills at home. We have a war here, and the veteran needs to bring their skills back home. This monument is a tremendous tribute, but it's the living memorials that will carry on the Edson spirit. That's what this country needs. It needs you. And I have never been more proud to be an American than I am today. I'm looking at the answers to my country right here, up front and personal. I would like to ask the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Mr. Paul Shedd, to come front and center, please. The Veterans Assistance Office went through some of their archives and found a picture of the man that we talk about. And it's our hope that when you people look at this picture, that 1,000 words will come to you. And you will realize that this spirit must never die. I would like to present to you first a picture of a one-star general by the name of Edson. The second is a two-star by the name of Edson. And the third is bigger than all of us. The ship, named after General Edson.
All I'm going to say is thank you for the Edson Detachment of the Marine Corps League. Thank you.
May I ask Charles Ganji, President of the 1st Marine Division Association of Boston, Massachusetts, to please come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is right here with the 1st Marine Division cap on, and I'm sorry that... Okay. I can take this out. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Now, here's this one.
I just want to say thank you, and it's an honor to be representing the 1st Marine Division Boston chapter of the Marine Corps Association 1st Marine Division. It's an honor that we could be a party to this, present this plaque to a man that we all respected. I did not have the privilege of knowing him, but heard of him in my 22 years in the Marine Corps. And with all respect and honor that I could be here today, and I thank you all for joining us also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure having you and your lady here today. There is Marines are always accused of associating with Marines, talking Marine talk, and sort of boosting themselves somewhat. Well, never let it be said that when you come to the city of Rutland that we don't give everybody a shake that's fair and square. And there is a gentleman here from the Seabees. And I would like to ask him to come forward for just a moment. I lost his card. No, I have it right here. Yeah. James J. Hansen. And here he is. And would you please come forward? Fellas, this is going to take us off the hook. Having this guy with us for a long time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Which one works?
This
You know, I'm Navy on the outside, but I think the Seabees all consider themselves to be as much Marine on the inside. This happens to be a special occasion for Seabees, but I didn't come here to brag about them. But yesterday, September 12th, was the date 50 years ago when the Seabees first arrived on Guadalcanal to help you First Mardiv people and bring some humanity into the inhumanity of war. And ever since then, we've been the best of friends. We've shared every emotion. We've laughed together and we've cried by ourselves. But practically all our pride comes from having been associated with the U.S. Marine Corps. Before I forget it, I would like everybody to look at the Rutland Herald today in a Blondie cartoon. And I think you'll appreciate what we look like. When Mayor Winberg said he was from something to his grandfather's generation, well, I guess I'm that. But I wanted to tell you a story about how important it is that we make this memorial to General Edson. Back in 1956, the Army bought a piece of property in Chester, Vermont, where General Edson grew up, to build an Army Reserve Center. And then SecDef Charles Wilson got into the picture, had an austerity program, and they delayed building that center until 1961. In the meanwhile, General Edson had passed on. So they formed a committee of local sports, political dignitaries and so on, to look and see who in Chester, Vermont was a good example of a patriot, somebody that made a name for themselves in the military. And of course, Merritt Edson came up. So my friend, Major Vic Polidor, who runs a drugstore in Ludlow now, he passed the name on up to his lieutenant colonel, and who is the Vermont sector commander, a lieutenant colonel named Calarco. And Calarco passed that word up to his general, whose name was Verbeck. And then the lieutenant colonel called the major back and he says, "Major, I've been 26 years in the Army and I have been reamed out and I have been bawled out, but I have never been abused to the degree that I had when I submitted a Marine officer's name for an Army installation." I just want to say how good it feels to me to be back in the family again. Along with that bit of prejudice on the part of the Army, I think we can see a little turning of events. Remember when General Schwarzkopf commended the Marine Corps for a class act when they went across the berm and liberated Kuwait? I think maybe we're getting a little bit more ecumenical in the service. We know we're proud of our own branch, but we also know that the others are here too. I'd like to tell you just a short story about my getting here this morning. I started out from Cavendish, Vermont, drove 6 miles into Cavendish Village, and the steering of my car, 2-year-old Ford Tempo, broke. One wheel is going off to starboard and the other one's heading straight ahead. So there was no way in the world could I make it from there. The nearest telephone was a sewage treatment plant. So I went in there, saw Howard Pixley, and he loaned me his pickup truck, and that's how my bride and I got here. And Ann is here somewhere in Marine Corps Red. She's over in the back. And today is our 40th wedding anniversary. Thank you. And congratulations to everybody for this monument. It's a great one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that this has bridged the gap between the services, and I think we've really done a very good job here. I want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. This is truly a great moment in the city of Rutland. We here don't really say a great deal about the people from Rutland that have gone off and done great things, but we have them, and when one occurs in the size of this one, it's only right and just that we gather together on a nice Sunday afternoon with the sun shining as it is right now. And in closing, ladies and gentlemen, these festivities, I'd like to call on Bob to please ask the members of your family to stand up and be recognized by the entire group. Bob?
Well, I'll see what I can do here. I think you've already been introduced to my brother Austin. He's the oldest of the two sons of General Edson. And Merton Edson is a nephew of General Edson. Vi Edson is the wife of the second nephew, Thornton Edson. My son, Merritt Austin III, he is my second of three. Joanne Edson is Vi's daughter. And let's see, Merton, where are the rest of your crew?
There's my daughter, Diane.
Yeah, okay. They're over here. And there's son Mike. Okay. I think that takes care of those that I'm aware of that are here today. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Bob, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been a most wonderful audience here this afternoon. In fact, I don't think of you as an audience. I think of you as a participant in what we have conducted, the business that we have conducted today. I want to thank you very, very much, to tell you how nice it was to have the marching organizations, the piper, and the color guard. It's just been wonderful. It's a day that I shall never forget, and one that I will cherish for years and years, I hope. Thank you.